Hey everyone, welcome to the 374th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot to talk about this week. My goodness. We're going to be talking about Irobot's new OS. We've got a merger in satellite IoT land. We've got a privacy-protecting smart home system from Carnegie Mellon. We've got a telco that wants to shift to being a techco. Can it make it? We also have a proposal for ARM. More news on the John Deere right to repair front. We've got some smart motorized blinds that y'all might be interested in if you still have blinds. And an update from Amazon about its Cloud Cam service. Kevin also reviewed the latest Ecobee smart thermostats, just like he said he would, so we'll be talking about that. And our guest this week is Ron Rock, who is the CEO of Microshare.io. He's talking to us about the next enterprise IoT packages that are going to sell. For a while, it was all about cleaning and people counting related to COVID. And the next package of products are going to be about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Woo! So, all of this awaits you, plus a message from our sponsor, the Lorawan World Expo, coming up in July. And now, let's go to a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Influx Data. At Influx Data, creator of the time series data platform InfluxDB, they believe in putting the developer first. They built their time series data platform with tools so developers don't have to make wholesale changes to their product or application just to use InfluxDB. Developers can code in their language of choice, using their preferred tools, and wherever they are building applications, in the cloud, on-premise, or locally. If you build IoT, analytics, and cloud applications, you should check out InfluxDB. It has a powerful API and toolset, a high-performance time series engine, and a community of developers in both cloud and open source. Get started for free and learn more at www.influxdata.com/Stacy-IoT. Okay, guess what, y'all? I made it back from Dallas. I'm still...
Yay!
Yeah, 2 weeks in Dallas. I mean, it was a lot, y'all.
I mean, there are worse places to be, for one thing, but I am so thrilled that you're back home. We spoke earlier in the week just to prep for this show, and it was like the first thing you said, I'm home, and I saw that background of your office, and I was so happy for you, because that's like being in almost like a prison. I know you were in a nice
I was
hotel,
in a 4-star
yes.
hotel. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's such an ordeal. I was like, well, was it though?
I know, but
I missed my family.
Being in captivity is what I feel is the challenge there, right?
It was a small room,
for everyone.
No fresh air.
Yeah, I'd be fine because I could live in a tiny house, but my wife won't let me. Well, I take that back. She will let me. She just won't live there with me.
I wouldn't live with you in a tiny house, and we've worked together for decades. Maybe not decades.
This is true.
But a long time.
Well,
all right, so I'm home. I'm still a little congested. COVID, I did not get the mild case. I mean, I did because I didn't go to the hospital, but I was seriously ill.
Yeah, it was bad.
Still feeling it.
So you got home, and did you notice your floors? Was that the first thing you noticed?
Why would I notice my floors?
Because we're about to talk about floors and robot vacuums.
Oh, missing the segue. I love it. No, I did not notice my floors. I actually noticed that we had installed a countertop and a backsplash, and I was like, oh, that happened. Cool.
COVID remodel
while I was gone. I did not notice my floors, but I do love my Roomba. And more importantly, my husband, who is I kid you not, y'all, he collects vacuum cleaners. He also loves the Roomba. It's really weird. My child the other day was like, you know how some old guys, they put up guitars on their walls? You could do that with your collection of vacuums. And I thought it was hilarious.
I collect Beatles photos, like original photos, and put them on my walls. I don't collect devices.
Yeah, my husband really just likes a clean floor. So
he must.
I don't know if he's going to be excited about this, but Irobot has basically introduced the Irobot OS. It is a new operating system for their vacuums, but it's not just for their vacuums. The idea is that it's kind of like a smart home OS. And I think it's really sneaky that Irobot's coming in here. And they've got two things going for them. One, they've got a robot that can roam around your home and do cool things.
One that people want to use and buy.
Yes.
Unlike what's the Amazon one called?
Astro?
Astro. I don't know anybody who is dying to get one after reading reviews.
Yeah, and Astro's like $1,500 and you have to have an invite. The $700 fanciest Roomba without the like giant jetpack suction thing, it's a pricey thing, but we do know that it works. Anyway, what they're doing is they're actually trying to use the fact that the robot knows what's in your home based on a camera and the mapping capabilities, but it's also going to start the idea here. This isn't happening right now. It's going to also allow the robot to say, oh my gosh, the air is so not high quality in here. So turn on this air purifier, which is a company, Eris is the name of the company Irobot purchased last year. So they're going to tie those devices together. And then eventually they're going to tie into things like, oh, there's an Amazon device over here. Oh, there's a sensor over here.
There's a pile of pet poop over here.
Yes, it would know that.
I know.
I really think this is smart because iRobot for the longest time has come at the home with both utility, people do like a robot vacuum, and privacy. They did get in trouble when they integrated with Google a couple years ago because people thought that iRobot was sharing data with Google, but it turns out that wasn't the case. The point here is I would actually trust this, and I really hope to see. I mean, they're saying all the right words. They're saying things like, hey, the problem with AI and robotics isn't better AI, it's that they don't have context.
Bingo. That's the word, context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it, man. And that's also part of my idea that like we should not have robots in the smart home. The smart home itself should be a robot. And like even my Roomba is just an appendage over this larger robot. So if iRobot can make that OS that turns my home into a robot, I would be down for that. I think.
So would I. I don't know if my Roomba, because we went kind of the low-cost Roomba route of like $300, I don't know that mine will get this feature set or all of the features, but I love what they're trying to do here. They say it's already able to identify and avoid 80 common objects. And with the context, you could theoretically be able to say, go clean in front of the television, maybe you spill popcorn.
I can say that today.
What?
I can set what I do. And this happened prior to the launch of this, but I noticed after it mapped my house, and I don't know if it noticed because there were like more crumbs in this area or if it noticed that it was labeled kitchen. But a couple weeks after I got it, it was like, hey, you have a lot of crumbs underneath this kitchen counter. Would you like me to set up a zone to clean extra here? And I was like, sure. And then once I did that, I basically would tell Google, ask Terrence to clean underneath the kitchen counter, and it would go there and it would clean. And it was amazing balls.
Hold on a second. Terrence?
Oh, Terrence is the name of my Roomba.
Do all of your husband's robot vacuums have names?
So I named Terrence. And, well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they're all girls' names. Who knows?
We call ours Sweepy.
Sweepy.
I guess naming these things is a thing. After
Yeah,
all.
yeah. iRobot tells us that, yes, people love to anthropomorphize their robots.
Oh, yeah.
Woo. All right. Moving right along. We've got a merger in IoT satellite land. A company called Astrocast has acquired Hyber. And Astrocast is they call it a nano satellite. It's a small satellite company. They acquired a company called Hyber, which was going to build its own small satellites constellation for IoT and then decided no, it was going to work with one of the bigger satellite providers and just offer IoT as a service to other people. This is not a great deal. Basically, what this is the rationalization of all these small sat IoT companies. So we're going to see a lot more of these deals. But this particular deal gives Astrocast, they're like, yeah, we get direct to end user sales strategy. We're going to have more products. We've got a remote oil well monitoring solution now. We've got asset tracking,
which has customers that Hyber has. Sure.
Yeah, so they're basically buying some business, and Hyber's like, yeah, we can't make it alone. We don't have a differentiating point of view. Oh, I should add that we should see more of this. We'll expect to see more of this on the satellite business side.
Mm-hmm.
More M&A, possibly some bankruptcies. I don't know. All right, moving along. Peekaboo. Kevin.
Oh, Peekaboo to you too.
What is Peekaboo?
So I'll explain what Peekaboo is in a second, but I want to say that we've talked in the past, a couple times in the past few years, about research projects or approaches that will help consumers keep their smart home data more private. Some of those approaches have used other speakers to listen for certain things that you say. And there's been a whole bunch of approaches using algorithms, whatever. This one is unique in the grand scheme of things. And it's actually very logical. I don't think it's going to have a mainstream following, but basically, Peekaboo, it's a hub-based approach to provide more control and transparency in your smart home data, giving the consumer the power to control that data as opposed to the device makers and the platform providers. So what this is, it's a small, I guess I'll call it a small server, or you call it a hub, made in the Human Computer Interaction Institute at Scilab.
Yeah, we see a lot of stuff from Carnegie Mellon's Scilab.
Oh, yeah.
They do a lot of privacy research in the smart home. We love those guys.
And basically, you could think of this as kind of like a firewall for your data, but you control what data can go through this device out to your cloud service providers, your Googles, your Apples, your Amazons, whoever it might be, Hue, Ecobee, et cetera. So it kind of sits in the middle of your smart home's devices and the internet. I like that approach. I don't think people want to have like a server like that. I don't think they want another hub to manage.
What I was thinking is, what if this turns into something like on Android or Apple, the privacy controls for different apps? So if there was a standard or, enough of a momentum around it, you could actually be like, when you brought your Hues into your Peekaboo system, it would say, hey, this app wants to share all this following data.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it could tell you why it was doing that, then you could pick it that one time and then it'd be okay. The challenge comes in when you bring in additional sensors. Like, do you want to share? I guess you have to check off, like, I'll share it with Madam A, I'll share it with blah, blah, blah. I actually think this is kind of precedented.
Yeah, and that's a good example. In fact, in the research, they say that if a developer of a device wants to gather some information, they use the example of the number of hours spent watching smart TV in a single day. You could go on your Peekaboo hub and you could allow that. Or you could say, no, don't do that. So yes, it would be like a permissions-based approach. I kind of wish, though, it didn't need that intermediary hardware. And the problem is none of the device makers or platform providers are going to go out of their way and enable this without the hardware, because they could. They absolutely could.
Well, maybe instead you could make it Matter certified. It would work with everything, and you could just pick a Matter certified privacy centric hub, and it would work with these things locally. It could happen.
It could.
Let's be optimistic.
Again, I said it's a logical approach, and I do like it. I don't know, maybe I'm being too pessimistic on the implementation.
No. If I look back over this, how long have we been? 2013? So almost the 10 years that we've been doing this, Kevin, we're always too optimistic.
That's fair. Yeah.
We're never pessimistic enough.
Yeah. Remember when we said Bixby was going to rule the world? No, I'm just kidding. We never said that.
Kevin said it. I'll throw you under the bus. No,
Oh.
we did not. No, I would never. So this is pretty cool. This is just a research project. We'll link to it. You can check it out. And maybe we'll get the Scilabs people again on the show.
Yeah.
I always like them. All right, moving across the pond, as it were, to BT. BT is a telco in the UK, and they've decided they're going to move from being a telco provider to a techco.
Because BT means business.
Yeah. So they're actually investing £100 million. That's almost 125 million USD in this strategy. And basically, it's all about IoT. They're basically like, you know what? We have the connectivity piece. We also have been investing in the AI and IoT piece. And now we're just going to put all that together for people. You see this with the telcos here in the US. AT&T and Verizon have both been doing these things. So it's mostly just, sure, telcos are trying to become, cloud tech providers. They wanted to be a cloud provider for a while. They realized that's not going to work. So now they're going for like this digital transformation, Accenture-like consulting thing. And, maybe that'll work.
Throughout their history, telcos have not just wanted to be pipes, right? They wanted to take the pipe and add value to it so they can make more money. So yeah, not surprising. IoT-centric approach here. Because what else are they going to do? Crypto? I don't know.
Probably. In other business transformations, we have a solution for ARM.
I came up with this, by the way, before I saw the news item. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. I'm proud of you, Kevin. So we all know that ARM did not get acquired by NVIDIA for $40 billion. ARM's customers were like, heck no. But Cristiano Amon, who is the CEO of Qualcomm, actually told the Financial Times that Qualcomm wouldn't mind investing in ARM and they could join forces with other chip makers to, like Intel or SK Hynix, to actually create a consortium to buy arms. Not to buy arms, to buy ARM. I'm just going to call that a congestion error right there.
Yeah. I like this idea, and not just because I said when Stacy said, "Oh, ARM's thinking about investing," and I'm sorry,
No, Qualcomm's
started thinking about investing in ARM. I'm like, they should just have a consortium because then all of the chip makers could be a part of it. And even though theoretically everybody owns ARM, really nobody owns ARM would have a competitive advantage like NVIDIA would have had, right? And she said that's exactly what they're going to do, I think. So
all of this is speculative, but the CEO of Qualcomm has talked about it. Apparently, the CEO of SK Hynix, which is a Korean chip maker, they actually talked about forming a consortium. Intel CEO talked to Samsung CEO about doing this. So this is clearly like, they're like, well, what do we do with ARM? SoftBank owns ARM. It's in a spin. It's trying to, make it public again.
I think it's the best possible outcome.
It might be.
Yeah.
All right. It's like socialism for chips.
Don't say that. Don't say the S word.
Okay. We've got news from John Deere. A couple weeks ago, we talked about, a lot of people thought this was really cool that apparently the Russian army stole a bunch of John Deere harvesting and combine equipment from a Ukrainian dealership. And when John Deere realized that they had been A, stolen from, and B, that it was Russians, they just turned off the tractors. They remotely disabled the tractors, which they can do. And I said, hey, that's a really cool story, like in this particular context, but it's also really scary when you think about a company that has a HQ in a particular region being able to remotely control in devices around the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if the United States got mad at Canada and ordered John Deere to turn off all the Canadian tractors? That would be awful. Well, here's a little wrinkle on this. This guy who sounds like a real winner, I'm not going to lie, this Jared Wilson, he was a farmer in Missouri, and basically he had to go to the FTC and he accused his John Deere dealer of basically saying, stop complaining to me about everything or I will not fix your tractor. And because I have to fix your tractor, you'll just have a broken tractor, buddy.
Yeah, he was considered not a profitable customer because of all of his issues that he complained about, but because he has no other recourse because of a lack of right to repair, what else is he to do?
Yeah. So once again, we see that putting all of this power into one person or one company's hands, in this case, it was a manager at a dealership, it's probably not the right way to go. And if we're going to do it, if we're not going to, follow along with right to repair, which we're getting there in some cases, that really puts people in a very vulnerable position because their stuff is software controlled. And if we're not going to have right to repair, then we need some pretty clear recourse to go through if something like this happens, because complaining to the FTC is not someone's first recourse. It's not like you're going to call them up and suddenly your problem is going to be solved. That's going to take like 2 to 3 years. It's not an ideal solution.
Yeah. And as a farmer, you don't even have 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Another aspect about this that I'd never thought of before. In the story about this, the farmer said when he began in 2013, there were 3 different repair shops within 30 minutes of his farm. Now there's only one. The next closest one is 80 miles away, and getting a tractor 80 miles down the road is certainly not inexpensive and hard to do. So it's interesting to me. I wonder if anybody has looked at this particular John Deere situation in terms of geography, logistics, and accessibility.
Yeah. Well, if you have giant companies owning most of the farms, it makes sense that you would consolidate your dealerships and you wouldn't necessarily need them. Consolidation is not always good, y'all. Hey, let's go back to the smart house for a second and talk about a product that doesn't get a lot of love. How many of y'all have blinds?
I have blinds.
Specifically, you do?
I do. Not smart blinds, but I have blinds.
Well, you might soon have smart blinds if you want. So Somfy has created a retrofit. It is called the Clever Tilt Blind Motorization Kit. And what you basically do is you take your existing blinds, you'll take them off the wall, you'll replace the tilt mechanism with a little Somfy motor, and Somfy makes all kinds of motors. And then you put the blinds back and you use the Somfy remote to control this tilt mechanism. And look, Somfy is expensive.
I was just going to say, because I'm looking at prices right now, because I do have some tilt blinds that they need replacing, and I was probably going to get like roller shades, partially because I prefer roller shades, but also because I know there are motorization and smart options for those. Yeah. I mean, these are $170, $180 each.
Yeah.
I'll just pull the string for that much money.
Well, the idea here is that you could tie it into eventually other things and like it could follow the sun, right? So you could like create a schedule, or it could like tie it into a sensor eventually. But yeah, they're expensive.
Those are good points. I'll still pull the string.
Yeah. But I will say Somfy does work. They have the MyLink system, which is expensive. And I will tell you, it doesn't support a lot of Somfy channels. Anyway, I have Somfy blinds, and I've actually purchased them 3 times now because they're really good. They're high quality. They're very quiet. They can move a lot of weight. So it's really useful. But tying them into your smart home is an expensive proposition, is all I would say there.
It took you 10 years to get me to spend the big bucks to go Lutron. You got another 10 years before I go buy Somfy.
Yeah, I don't know if you would need that. I mean,
yeah.
Again, I've always had wall-to-wall windows in my homes.
Yeah, I don't have
so
that.
So that's why, and you don't. So if you have normal blinds, I don't know if you would have to do this. But if you're in the market for this and you have the funds and you like your blinds, like you're not going to replace them, this is an option.
Yeah.
There you go. We're letting you know. All
and
right.
Here goes an option.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, it's the smart home market. One new device comes in, one old device goes away. For people who bought Amazon's Cloud Cam security camera, you have until December 2nd before it stops working. They're just going to delete all the recordings and the hardware will literally not work. That's it. Nothing.
Yeah, this was part of the Amazon Key program, which I guess is not really a thing anymore, is it?
I'm sure it's advertised, but I don't think it's I don't think millions of people use it.
Yeah, this was where Amazon, had a camera and a door lock that worked with the program that would let delivery people put stuff inside your front hallway.
And therein lies the problem.
Yeah. Or wherever yeah. If you have a front hallway. If you don't, then they just put it inside your living room. So yeah, that was, a lot of people did not embrace that concept, apparently. And it makes sense that they would.
I will say, unlike many other companies, Amazon is kind of making good on this by letting current Cloud Cam owners redeem an offer for a free Blink Mini Cam. So you get
if they are actively using their Cloud Cam.
Yes. Yes. And Key Edition owners can also get an Echo device with that as well.
Okay, stuff goes off. You stop supporting stuff all the time. That makes sense. 5 years is not a terrible amount of time.
No.
They apparently stopped selling them in 2019. So, okay, Amazon's doing things pretty right here. They're giving you more than 6 months notice, saying, hey, it's roughly 6 months notice. This is going to end. They're offering you an alternative for free if you're actually using it. So I can't be upset by this.
No. They're even giving a 1-year subscription for the Blink deal that they have.
Yeah. So
they're going over and above on this one.
I'm pro this.
Yeah.
All right. And now let's talk about air conditioning.
Yes, because Kevin's died 2 weeks ago. Just in time for my Ecobee Smart Thermostat Premium review. Luckily, I was able to fix my air conditioning. We may have a story on fixing things around the house in the very near future, because a lot of things can be fixed on the cheap.
If you've got the right to repair it, you should repair it.
You are correct. That's absolutely correct. But after fixing the air conditioner, which was very timely because it's been feeling like 99 degrees here lately in Pennsylvania, I was able to unbox and install the Ecobee Smart Premium Thermostat that comes with a remote sensor. The company announced this 2 weeks ago. It's a $249.99 thermostat. I should note they also have a lower model that's new. It is the Smart Thermostat Enhanced. It does not have some of the features that the premium one has, and I will point that out as we go through this quick little review. I'm just going to say I'm having a hard time finding anything not to like about it, and I'm saying that as a current Ecobee third generation owner. Maybe it's even second generation. So my Ecobee is a couple years old, doesn't have a microphone and speaker, which this one does. The enhanced one does not, I should point out. The device looks much nicer. It has a zinc frame around it. The screen is slightly bigger. It is higher resolution. You can see more on the display. And everybody, including Stacy, will be happy to know the crappy user interface of changing the temperature is so much better.
Good Lord. Yeah,
This
that was
alone
so
is almost worth
painful.
$250, people.
Yes. I am surprised that you would replace, because I think of my thermostat really is just kind of like a cool. I was surprised. I feel like my thermostat is just chugging along just fine, but you made a couple points, the air quality monitor, the change in UI, and you also said, and this was the most surprising to me, is that you felt more comfortable in your house.
Yes, you mentioned sensors, and I'm going to point out that this uses new millimeter wave sensors, which basically use a specific radio frequency as radar. And it uses this in thermostat only, not in the remote sensors. I want to be very clear about that. So it's much better at detecting movement and detection. We've used Norm to try and have him set it off, and it hasn't happened. I cannot sneak up on the thermostat, even from around a corner. I have tried. The radar waves must be bouncing off me and bouncing back. I do not know. It seems magical if you're into that kind of thing, which after an hour of trying to fake it out, I was into that kind of thing. The sensors are also improved from measuring temperature. And I say I'm more comfortable in the home because when we would have the air on a typical work day, my wife works literally right next to the thermostat downstairs and I'm upstairs. We might manually set the air conditioning to like 74 because it just didn't seem cool enough in the house. When we do it this thermostat, it feels noticeably cooler. And yes, I'm going to say that it's using more electricity in that regard because the air conditioner is running longer. I don't mind as long as I'm comfortable and I'm willing to pay the extra electricity. I just thought the old one was doing its job, but obviously it wasn't doing it well enough. So that's been a huge improvement. The remote sensor, as I said, does not use millimeter wave. It does have presence and motion detection, as did the old one. But here's the big deal, to me anyway. These sensors are now in the thermostat and the remote are now exposed so that you can use them as individual sensor devices. So now I very quickly have set up an automation to when anybody goes into the master bedroom, which is where that remote sensor is, turn on the bedroom light as long as the sun is mostly down. And it's working fine. It's working really, really well. So now I've added more automation that I didn't expect to add, but I don't need to buy individual sensors now because I can just reuse or repurpose this one for another purpose, which is good.
See, right here, what we're seeing is the promise of Matter coming. I mean, I know that Ecobee is part of the Matter working group. I was going to say consortium, but what this sort of thing is where I hope we keep going. Cause I currently have a couple different, I have a Hue motion sensor for my Hue stuff. I have a security motion sensor running around and I'm like, ugh, stupid.
Yeah.
So yes.
I mean, a sensor is a sensor. I mean, it should just be able to be used across different devices for automations and such. It doesn't matter what its other functions are and who makes it. So I agree. And that's handy right there. You mentioned air quality, and I'm just going to backtrack up to about a month ago when I reviewed the $199 AirThings Wave pollution device, which measures humidity, particulate matter, and
carbon dioxide.
Yeah, it's probably carbon dioxide. That's all it did, though. It just measures those things. It doesn't really integrate with anything other than IFT. There's no smart home integration. It just tells me I've got bad air, so I can do something about it. The new Ecobee Premium, again, not the Enhanced, has indoor quality sensors to measure VOCs and carbon dioxide. It will not integrate with other smart devices such as purifiers and fans and such. It will work if you have some other wired device on your HVAC system, such as a ventilator or dehumidifier or humidifier. So you can set that up. I don't have any of those on my HVAC system, so I couldn't test it. And if you don't have any of those, that's okay because the monitoring is nice, and you also get alerts just like you would have with the $200 Airwave that I mentioned. So for $250, to me, this is a far better buy because you're getting so much more. I also, real quick, before I forget, never had a thermostat with a speaker and microphone because I never thought I needed it. You know what? It's pretty good. I don't mind paying the extra to have that. I hooked it up with Siri and HomeKit, and then Barb can sit next to it and say, open the garage door when somebody's, a delivery is coming or something, and it'll just do it, just like if she was talking to her phone or her watch. So it streams music to Bluetooth music and Spotify, but I wouldn't use it for that personally. So overall, I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has a different home, but I will be spending the $250 out of pocket once I return this review unit to upgrade our Ecobee. It is well worth it to me.
Wow.
Yippers.
All right. Maybe I'll consider it. Okay. You did mention the lower priced one, right?
Yeah, it's $199.95.
Okay, so save $50, no speaker, no microphone.
Doesn't look as nice. You don't get a remote sensor. I mean, you just get so much more for the $50.
Spend the $50.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, that concludes the news segment of the show, but let's talk about the Internet of Things podcast hotline. This is the segment of the show where we hear from y'all. You can give us a call and we may answer your questions. You can also just tell us your thoughts by calling us at 512-623-7424. And we might play your voicemail on the air. And everyone who calls is entered to win a prize of our choice. Every month we do a drawing. You have to be in North America to win. Sorry. But we actually just did a drawing for the month of May. And our winner for May, and they win an Ember coffee mug, which is like one of my favorite things. Who is that, Kevin?
That would be Nicholas from South Carolina.
Congratulations, Nicholas. I will reach out to you to send that over. For the month of June, I haven't decided on a prize yet, but start calling us because it's going to be something awesome. I'm thinking something to do with lawn care, if we're being honest, because it's summer.
It is summer in this hemisphere.
Yeah. So, and we can't give it down to you in South America or Australia. So anyway, we also have a question, this week's question from Ron. Let's hear it.
Hello, Stacy. My name is Ron Gaynor. My question is, I've been a smart home automation user for the last 30 years, currently using Insteon devices, which, as you know, has closed down and the servers have shut down, leaving the app and my products useless, other than manual turning on and off. I'm at a beginning stages now. Instead of using a bridge hub to allow these to voice activate with Alexa or Google and so forth, to instead just put in all new devices and a different protocol. I've also switched from an Android phone to an Apple phone, and now wanted to know if I should be considering HomeKit, if I should look at Zigbee, Thread type devices, Z-Wave devices. I'm a little bit confused in terms of what is the best direction to now go moving forward. Any help would be much appreciated. Thank you again.
I guess I'll take this one because you don't use an iPhone, Stacy.
That is true.
Yes, you got me to switch to Lutron after 10 years, but I have still not gotten her to switch to an iPhone. No, that's fine.
Someone has to be on the Google ecosystem.
And that someone has to be you.
I'm feeling like you win because HomeKit, man, all right.
The switch over, it's been over a year now. I'm very happy. And I think Ron's going to be happy too. The high level answer I would say is Ron is heading in completely the right direction. Go with HomeKit since you have an Apple phone. It just works really, really well. You didn't have this option with Android, obviously. And while you can, use Google, Amazon, SmartThings, or whatever with either Android or iPhone, I really think you're heading in the right direction here with HomeKit. Now, what I would say as far as new devices, and it sounds like you're preparing to spend some money and replace a lot of your older things, and that makes sense to me, I would hold off. If there's anything that you feel you need and it's already HomeKit approved, then I would get it because it's just going to work and it's going to work really well. But if you're thinking about Zigbee, Z-Wave, or anything else, I would wait until Matter comes out. And that shouldn't be long. It's the fall.
Which means a lot of devices are already announced as being like, these are going to upgrade to Matter. So you could also look for that.
Right. You could, and take the chance. And we've even heard the announcement of some Matter bridges or hubs that will let non-Matter devices work with Matter devices. So I'm just thinking, don't spend all your money right now. Take a look at what's in the HomeKit ecosystem. Get the devices that are there that will meet your needs. And for other devices, if you can live without them for a little bit longer, and by a little bit, I'm saying 3 to 6 months, I would wait. And then I would wait to see what happens when the Matter spec is finalized and approved and devices are coming out and so on, because that's going to save you money in the long run, I think, by buying things now that may not work as well in the future.
Yes, I agree. So, Ron, hopefully this helps you. And as an added bonus, you can stick all this on your Christmas list and people can buy it for you.
Yes.
If you're a dad, it's always hard to find dad gifts. So this would be helpful for everyone.
Yep.
All right. If you have a question for us, give us a call at 512-623-7424 and you will be entered to win our June prize, which as of yet has not been named. And thanks everyone who called for the month of May. Y'all are awesome. That concludes this section of the show, but please stay tuned for our guest, Ron Rock, the CEO of Microshare.io. We're going to be talking about what's next in enterprise IoT spending after all the COVID spending. But first, a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is the Lorawan World Expo. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is the Lorawan World Expo. And I have Donna Moore, who is the CEO and chairwoman of the LoRa Alliance, here to talk to us about the Lorawan World Expo coming up at the Palais de Congrès in Paris on July 6th and 7th of this year. Donna, can you just first tell us why LoRaWAN is the leading LPWAN?
So LoRaWAN is the de facto LPWAN standard globally because it was designed from the beginning as a secure, open, interoperable standard. And over the past 7 years, our LoRa Alliance members and the global LoRaWAN ecosystem have achieved so many incredible goals, which has positioned LoRaWAN as the market leader. Let me just list a few so that everyone can get the breadth and depth of the accomplishments. LoRaWAN is now a mature technology that has been officially recognized by ITU as an international standard. We have the largest, most diverse member ecosystem, and that includes all participants of the value chain. We have the most deployed networks worldwide and the only LPWAN with network options like public, private, satellite, community, and hybrid with roaming capabilities and global roaming. We have the most globally deployed solutions and the largest at-scale deployments. We have the most multi-RAN deployments with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G, RFID, OMS, DLMS, and it goes on. We have the most certified LPWAN devices with the greatest choice of vendors and the greatest diversity of devices on the market. And one last thing I'll say is that we have a flexible business model with either CapEx or OpEx options. So those are just some of the reasons why LoRaWAN is the leading LPWAN standard.
And what is the LoRaWAN World Expo?
Well, the LoRaWAN World Expo is the largest LoRaWAN event brought to you by the LoRa Alliance. We have the theme of Discover the Power of LoRaWAN, and the focus is on LoRaWAN development, deployment, and how to drive business performance and profits for our members and their customers.
And what will attendees learn at the expo?
The LoRaWAN World Expo is the best opportunity in 2022 to hear from the brightest minds in the IoT industry and a network with LoRaWAN market leaders to collaborate and partner on business opportunities, which is really how to drive your IoT business forward. The focus will be on social responsibilities, and attendees will discover the power of LoRaWAN in helping to solve the world's most pressing challenges for people, planet, and profits.
So where can people go to find more information about the LoRaWAN World Expo?
For more information and to register, go to www.lora-alliance.org. And don't forget that the LoRaWAN World Expo will be in person at the Palais de Congrès in Paris, July 6th and 7th. And I really hope to see everyone there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Jonathan Berry, who is the founder and CEO of Goliath. Hi Jonathan, how are you today?
Good, Stacey. Thanks for having me here.
I am really excited. And first up, I have to tell our audience that I am recovering from COVID, so my voice is a little weird, and I'm quarantining away from the studio in a hotel room in Dallas. So the sound quality is not probably what you're used to in the show. I apologize, but this is going to be totally worth it because Jonathan has been with the IoT for as long or longer than I have. So, Jonathan, you started in this at Nest, yes? Working at Google Nest?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I was at Google for a bunch of years, and just after the acquisition of Nest, I got the opportunity to join the embedded team.
And you were working on networking there?
Yeah. The developer platform in general, but within the embedded group, there was a wireless team, the communications team, and they were the ones responsible for developing the networking stack, but also protocols like Thread.
Like Thread and the ancient protocol that we probably have all forgotten about called Weave.
Yes.
Then Google used that name for something else, which, again, very confusing. And then after that, you went over and worked at Particle for a while, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I joined pretty early on, working on the hardware side of things. So that's everything from the dev boards and modules, but also the embedded operating system and the wireless technology that they worked on.
Got it. So I feel like you've got really good grounding here working at one platform, then moving on to another actual IoT development platform at Particle. And then you decided to start your own IoT development platform with Goliath. So why don't you talk to me about why?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of those things where if you're in the industry long enough, you start seeing patterns and opportunities. When I was at Nest, I got to learn from really pioneers in the IoT space, seeing things at scale, Particle, building developer platforms, and seeing huge adoption, both on the developer side as well as the commercial side. And there was a theme, and actually to the job I took before starting Goliath 2 is actually contradictory to what most people talk about, that hardware is hard. In fact, that if you're a hardware company and you're building connected devices, actually hardware is the easy part. It's the things like servers and databases and security and software updates that is really hard for hardware companies. We built our own solutions at Nest and at Particle, and they were really challenging. It's probably where a lot of the R&D was focused on. And it caused me to think about, well, why do we keep on inventing what seemed to be easy to do thing over and over again? And that's when I started to dig into the space and was the kernel of the idea of Goliath.
And what exactly was the easy thing to do? That was all of the servers and everything else, security?
Yeah. So it's interesting when when being in a meeting with a potential customer and they said, "Well, we're a software company. We have servers and we have mobile apps. How hard is it to send a software update to a server or store something in a database? Why is it so much harder to do in IoT? I could do that myself." But when you start talking about IoT devices, and you have many guests on previous podcasts, the domain is completely different. A lot of times you're talking about tiny devices, tiny sensors that are constrained on battery. They may have kilobytes of bandwidth. So, that 10 megabyte update for your mobile app is going to take 10 hours on an IoT device. And so we start to unpack all the stuff you need to build in the cloud and translate that into the IoT world. You have to actually start from a different fundamental place. And the technology you use, the protocols you implement, the cloud infrastructure is not something you can just grab off the shelf. And so the kernel was, well, why can't you just grab something off the shelf? Why isn't there a vendor that is sort of those primitives that a hardware company can reach out for and integrate into their solution without having to build it themselves, without having to DIY? And it will work for their IoT applications.
Got it. And so that's what you invented with Goliath.
Yeah. So Goliath is an IoT developer platform, and we focus on hardware makers, hardware companies, hardware engineers. And what we said was, instead of trying to take general purpose computing that's working fine for servers and cell phones, let's start from the principle of a device. If I'm a tiny cellular device, I need to communicate securely over the cloud. Well, what protocol should I implement? How do I manage my bandwidth? How do I be efficient when I do a software update while still being secure? And we've been building out that solution for the last a year and a half since you covered us in your newsletter.
Another thing you mentioned was security and things like software updates. Can you talk about what you're trying to do to help with that?
Yeah. A lot of times people think about security and they think about, preventing eavesdropping, but actually software updates is a critical part. Whether it's you pushed a bad piece of software down to your devices or there's a vulnerability disclosed, you know, having the ability to software update your device in the field is mission critical. It's on the OWASP top 10. It's being pushed through legislation. Yet most companies don't think about software updates from the beginning, and it's pretty complicated. I will say, having done this now 4 times at 4 different companies, and part of our platform and what we focus a lot of our energy on is secure, reliable software updates. And if you can design in such a way that the engineers who are working on the devices and responsible for the devices have an easy way to integrate secure software updates, check. And if you can have the team that operates the devices have an easy way to manage and roll out those software updates, check, then security and software updates just become a thing that is part of your solution. And that's one of the first things we built with Goliath and made sure that it is as integrated, but also super secure from the very beginning.
Okay. And I feel like when I talk to people about, oh my gosh, IoT devices are hard, they mention a lot of things that you talk about, such as, oh, if they're battery constrained, they're constrained with battery power, they're constrained on performance and memory. And the other big thing is that these devices are hugely fragmented. So there's millions of operating systems, some custom, some popular, I should say, real-time operating systems or RTOSs that these things run. And usually that's where in the past people have focused. So I'm curious how y'all help or maybe don't help with fragmentation or your take on that particular problem.
Yeah, it's a great question. The world of IoT, the types of devices you might want to create, there's a lot of combinational options there. If you think about like smartphones, right? There's Android, there's iOS, and there's not much else. Yet there's a fragmentation of hardware. In IoT, you might be building a mobile device that needs a cellular network or a stationary device that needs Ethernet. So it does create this broad area of different platforms, different hardware platforms to choose from. And the combinations become even more complicated. And so the role of operating systems in part is to build some layer of commonality. And so when most hardware companies get started, they pick one of those operating systems, which allows them to not just move faster, but also say, well, today you might be using an ST part, but tomorrow you might be using an XP part, and our OS can help abstract that. This layer of abstraction is because the operating systems include functionality, sometimes called the hardware abstraction layer, that looks for the common features across every chip and every device you might use, and either creates a lowest common denominator, which is sometimes fine, or in more open ecosystems, like open source operating systems, the actual hardware vendor plugs it in. So if you're using an operating system that supports both ST and NXP, ST and NXP might be contributing the underlying messiness that actually makes it work with their particular device, but the OS keeps it abstract. So you as a hardware creator, choose your OS, and you can either rely on that abstraction just working, so you can switch between NXP and ST, or it's actually being supported by the vendor you work with, and they ensure that it's working well. So it's almost like device drivers for printers, where when you install a new printer, it's very likely that your operating system has that printer driver, so you don't have to worry too much about it. And that's the trend we see with these hardware abstraction layers and real-time operating systems.
And everybody loves printer drivers. No one's ever had a problem with them, ever.
Yeah, that's right.
So how did that influence what you built with Goliath?
Yeah, and this is part of our lessons over the last, call it 2 years of development. At the end of the day, you're building an application that you want to send some sensor data to and maybe do a software update to update new functionality or fix a security bug. And so we're trying to sit on top of that because we don't know which customer will come in with this flavor of operating system or their own homegrown thing. And so by building on top of existing operating systems with our own software, we can tap into the hardware abstractions and the investment from all these companies and chipset vendors, like et cetera, so that we can take advantage of it and enable our users to use our secure cloud services. And so it's almost like being able to build a little adapter on top of the driver. I don't know, what's a good example? Like when you're in Chrome and you click the print button and you see a little pop-up window, Chrome is calling into the, this analogy is going to break down pretty fast, but Chrome is calling into the printer subsystem and then printing on your behalf. So it allows people to build Chrome and Firefox and Safari on the same operating system. So we pick a nice abstraction layer on top of it.
It's abstractions all the way down. It's always the case in computing.
Exactly.
Okay, and since we're talking about hardware, I feel like it's really important to talk about something that is, my gosh, 2 years in, still affecting the community, which is the chip shortage. And I'm very curious what you're seeing with your customers and even your own efforts. I know you've got people who are prototyping and building all kinds of things at Goliath just for fun. So, how is that affecting the market?
Yeah, the stories are not exaggerated. Why I can't get my Xbox for Christmas kind of thing. Those are true, but for IoT creators, it's even more acute because there was a smart decision and trend for the last 5 years. Let's use commodity parts like the things they put in cars because they make it in high volume. Well, now those are in short demand and they're going to cars, and so it's deeply impacting hardware companies. Whether you're a startup with not a lot of purchasing power or an industrial application who doesn't buy a lot of units, it's pervasive, and it's requiring companies to redesign even when they weren't expecting to. So in terms of what we're seeing at Goliath, people come through the front door maybe with a greenfield application saying, I want to use part X from company Y, and we support it. Great, you're good to go. But for more mature brownfield, let's say companies with product in the market, they're saying, we can't ship our parts. We have 1,000 orders back ordered because we can't get the main MCU or the microcontroller or the modem. And so we weren't planning on redesigning for another 3 to 5 years, and we're doing it right now. And it's causing obviously a lot of cost and complexity, and even still paying those premiums and all that effort, it's still hard for these companies. So the good news is there are still lots of choices in the market for a lot of areas, and people are making the work to swap out. I think I also have some long-term positive like lessons learned, I guess, to be a little bit more single-sourced resilient. So thinking ahead in case this happens again, making sure you choose parts that you could maybe redesign around, or vendors that give you a little bit more flexibility. But I think that we're going to feel this pain for at least another 2 years. Is what I'm hearing.
Oof, 2 more years of this. Well, let's talk about picking parts that are easier to design around because I feel like I've talked to big, like Fortune 500 companies that are, maybe especially conglomerates they've built by acquiring things, and they're trying to rationalize like the number of parts they support. They're trying to rationalize the number of RTOSs they support for their connected devices. And I feel like from a design perspective, that makes a lot of sense. So what would your advice be to companies who are evaluating this and being like, man, how do I decide what RTOS to pick? How do I decide what hardware parameters matter? And if I'm trying to design kind of maybe it's the lowest common denominator, maybe it's the highest, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a little bit of an existential one because it really depends on the kind of product you're building, the kind of industry you're in, and I can give some examples of how you might think about it differently. There are definitely different scales of products. By scale, I mean volume. So if you're in a high volume, low margin, let's say consumer area, well, your BOM cost is the most important thing. Your operating costs, your OPEX. Well, you can throw a couple more engineers if it allows you to reduce the costs of, let's say, your design and your cloud. But if you're in an industrial application, which we focus a lot more on in general, well, a $5,000 piece of equipment, whether you're using the $2 part or the $10 part, doesn't really matter. And so making that sort of selection criteria is definitely helpful. I would say that if at all you're in an industry or an application that's super specialized, so for example, cellular, right? There's not that many cellular providers you can go with. And being able to say, well, what if I can't buy any of the parts from this one vendor? Picking a way to make sure that you can, at least for a lot of money, but still possible, design out that one cellular modem for another cellular modem is something you probably should invest in. And it might cost you $250,000, but then you could ship that really expensive industrial controller. On the software side, there's more choice actually. It's a little bit easier because if you make the right decisions up front, you can wholesale change your functionality or even your operating system, which I probably wouldn't recommend. But choosing from the beginning operating systems that, one, work with the hardware you want to work with, two, give you the flexibility. So like have lots and lots of hardware it supports for that switching between the vendors, and probably the ecosystem around it. Because it's not just about the hardware, it's about the support. Is the chipset vendors providing support? Is there documentation and sales enablement tools and et cetera? So making sure you don't pick a niche one or a less prevalent one is probably a good bet.
All right. And every year I look for the data on which RTOSs are most popular. I know that free RTOS has always been up there. Amazon kind of acqui-hired the guy behind that. Microsoft bought the company behind ThreadX, and there's also like Zephyr. I don't know if people are still using Contiki. So are there RTOSs out there that are popular? Which ones?
Yeah, there's a ton of options when it comes to software. There's the commercial side, like ThreadX is commercially supported by Microsoft. FreeRTOS is and will continue to be a very popular choice among operating system developers. And Zephyr is another really popular one. Embed was pretty popular a few years ago, but seems to be waning. But if you're looking for open source options, probably the two front runners is FreeRTOS and Zephyr. Now, Goliath, we have been investing a ton in Zephyr. It's actually been our first operating system we've built into our platform, primarily for the fact that a lot of chipset vendors are members of Zephyr and contributing directly. But at the end of the day, if you're working with a chipset vendor and they say, hey, here's our free RTOS solution, you probably should go with whatever's most supported by your hardware, because that's when you're going to get the best help when you run into issues. Thankfully, with open source, those also include ecosystems and communities and people contributing. So we're pretty happy with Zephyr, and we're seeing year over year significant increase in adoption.
Got it. So we just spent a lot of time on RTOSs and chips. Let's talk about networking briefly. There are tons of options out there. I would love for you to talk about which networking protocols you're seeing in the industrial space, since you mentioned working there. What are you seeing the most interest in right now?
For us, we wanted to figure out what would be the most compelling that we could do really quickly. I mean, we had a lot of experience working with cellular. So we started it with cellular, in particular low power wide area cellular like Cat-M1 and NB-IoT. And anywhere where you have that sensor in a field or on a subgrid or in a micromobility device like an asset tracker or bike kind of thing, that seems to be growing year over year. And sales of, from what I can tell, cellular IoT modems is also increasing. So lots of cellular, in particular the low power, low bandwidth versions of it. Ethernet, we love Ethernet. People think it's not sexy. I think it's one of the super under talked about IoT communication technologies. PoE is getting really interesting. You were tweeting about single wire the other day, and that's just super reliable for an actual industrial or smart building application. And actually, more recently, we've been getting kind of out of the woodworks interest in Thread for commercial applications. And so that's part of the reason why we're excited about Thread and the Thread group. And I think there's going to be upswing in that as well.
Yeah, you recently joined the Thread group, and I know we are excited about it here on the podcast, primarily because it is the low data rate method of communication for Matter. So it's kind of surprising that people might be using it for industrial. But since you were actually way back at the beginning of Thread when it was at Google and Nest, what do you think about it? What's compelling about it for the IoT?
Thread is a networking technology. The fact that it's based on IP, the fact that it's using open standards from the power of the internet itself, allows it to be really flexible. And when you're talking about, let's say, a consumer ecosystem like Matter, that means that the companies behind Matter and the standards body, they can go build out their data models and their mobile secure provisioning. But if you're in a completely different domain, then you can use those same IP primitives to build your own flavor of what a smart building control system might look like. And so it's sort of this flexibility of being a networking stack that is designed to be developed upon is super compelling. Now, in addition to, if you're seeing any form of scale, when you're deploying local wireless networks, it's so complicated. We take for granted the sort of reliability of our TP-Links and our Eero routers for at-home networking, but networking is a really hard problem. And if you're trying to tell someone who may be a building manager or an IT team at a factory, oh, you're going to go run this wireless bunch of sensors, that's a daunting task. And the parts I'm really excited about Thread is the ability to just kind of work. It's just a reliable mesh network. You can have a bunch of sensors. You can scale up to thousands reliably, and it feels more like almost like a wired connection at that point when you have such a reliable implementation. So when trying to make a decision between, do we run a lot of cable? Do we try to invest in other wireless technology? Thread is a great option to allow you then to create your own solution around it.
Okay, yes. And I mean, I'm excited because it's low latency. It seems so reliable. I'm really, really keen on this in the home. So it makes a ton of sense for the industrial space because they've really tried, they've done a lot with proprietary and they've really tried to shoehorn things like Bluetooth and Z-Wave and some weird stuff in there. And it didn't seem to fit. So Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all this information with us. And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening and please subscribe.